ever been involved in any environmental fight, you know how difficult it is to carry nature into the halls of the courtroom. And so we bring this panel to you today to talk about how our current legal system, especially in the United States, has failed not only the planet, but failed people hoping to defend the planet in our court system, which is a place that we are told is where you can go to seek justice. It's a place where you can go and tell another being or entity to stop because they are going to cause harm. And unfortunately, in the American court system, through the power of the Supreme Court and some horrific decisions that have been made, the doors of the courthouse have been narrowly closed to environmentalists and to people hoping to use our court system to say stop in the name of the natural world. And so I'm here today with two profound leaders of the rights of nature movement, and I'm happy and honored to introduce them. First, we have Grandma Casey Camp-Horinek, who's a councilwoman and drumkeeper of the Women's Scalps Dance Society in the Ponca Nation. Grandma Casey grew up in the American Indian rights movement and has been a force in this nation, not only fighting for Indigenous sovereignty, but fighting for the rights of ecosystems. She has brought so much awareness and strength to her community and the Ponca Nation. She also works with movement rights, which has been shepherding in the rights of nature movement to Indian country. And then we're also joined by Dr. Kelsey Leonard, who's a water scientist, legal scholar, policy expert, writer, and enrolled citizen of the Shinnecock Nation. Her work particularly focuses on Indigenous water justice and the climate, and the governance underpinning our shared sustainable future. She serves as a member of the Great Lakes Water Quality Board, and she has been instrumental in safeguarding the interests of Indigenous nations for environmental planning and builds Indigenous knowledge and science into new solutions for sustainable water and ocean governance. And my name is Britt Gandolfi. I'm from Southeast Louisiana. I'm a Homa descendant, and I work with the Bioneers organization. I come from one of the most toxic and air-polluted places in the United States, and I was brought into this work in my time in law school when I realized that our environmental laws that we have, they're not going to cut it. And if our current environmental laws were working, we wouldn't be in this room right now. And so I would just like to open the floor and ask each of these women to share their story and their history in not only their movement for Indigenous sovereignty, but how the work fighting for Native sovereignty is tied into fighting for greater standing for the environment in our laws and courts.
We'll start with Dr. Leonard.
Sure.
Request.
Akwe Renikasa, hello, good day everyone, it's wonderful to be with you. Way to start with an easy question, Britt.
Just tell us your story.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you throw the word sovereignty into the mix, it's just inherent. And I think that's a lot of what Grandmother Casey and Britt and myself are advocating for, is a recognition that tribal sovereignty, Indigenous sovereignty isn't just words you throw around, it's an understanding of our inherent place on this planet and the way in which we have been trusted a responsibility and a duty of care for the natural world and for ourselves. They're inextricably linked. So for me in particular, I'm an affiliate with the Earth Law Center. It is an international environmental organization that works on outreach, advocacy, and education in the space of Earth law. And what I like to tell folks when we think about Earth law is to think of it as a tree. And right now there are many branches on that tree that make up this emerging body of law called Earth law. One of those branches is rights of nature, which we're here to talk about today, but there are other branches like rights of future generations, the right to a healthy environment, the human right to water, all of these wonderful different branches. And some of these branches are on the tree right now, and some will break off as a branch does, and new branches will grow. And so I really encourage folks to think of Earth law in that way, as not a static body of law, but something that is living just like our planet is. And the way in which we craft tools and the tools that sit within our toolkit are always evolving and changing. So with all of that taken into consideration, how did I get connected to the Earth Law Center, to this work in rights of nature, specifically of the branch of the tree? Well, I think in large part it stemmed from the guidance and leadership from water walkers. So I am from a part of the world that sits on the eastern Atlantic Ocean, what we currently know as the United States. So Long Island is where my traditional territory is. And when I was going through law school, there was this movement building and a movement that I became consciously aware of called water walking. And it was building as a movement in that time, which was about 15 or so years ago, but it's an ancient practice. It's something that many Indigenous cultures have, not only within Turtle Island, but all around the world. But it was really being put forward as a reclamation and a revitalization process for reconnecting with water and that life-giving and life-supporting force that makes everything on this planet possible, whether it be fresh water or salt water, as we just heard. And so when I was hearing about the water walkers and wanting to support their work, I just started walking for the water. I attended water walks, I sat with grandmothers who were walkers, and then when I transitioned from law school to doing my PhD, I transitioned from the eastern portion of the United States to the Great Lakes, where I live and work now. And in that space, I was on Facebook, like most natives are. And this wonderful grandmother put out a call on Facebook, and she said, I need someone to help me count all the water walks that we've done, and to help us organize as we're building this wonderful Great Lakes water walk that was going to happen in 2017 along the shores of Lake Ontario. And I said, just responded to her Facebook message, and I said, if you're looking for someone, I'm a PhD student who has plenty of time on my hands. Don't have that now, gosh, looking back. Would you like my help? And she said, she was cautious. She didn't say yes at first. She said, well, come and visit with me. Come in, we're gonna do this, at the time, there's a book that had just come out by her and another water walker. And she said, come to our book opening and let's sit and have a chat. So I showed up. And the short of this story is that person was Grandmother Josephine Vandeman, who is known as the water walker. She didn't like that term. She's since passed away, but her legacy is the legacy that is the sort of more modern water walking movement, if we like to call it that. It started through prophecy, like many of the things you've heard this week. Shortly after, prophecy was retold in 2001. And then after that prophecy was told, everyone was asked, well, what are you going to do about it? And so Grandmother Josephine went back to the shores of Lake Superior where she lived, and she sat and she visited with other grandmothers and she talked with folks. And they decided they were going to reclaim that ceremony of walking for the water. And they started walking for the lakes, all of them. They started with Lake Superior, and then they walked all of the Great Lakes over numerous years, and from bringing water from coast to coast. And there's been now more than 200 water walks all around the world, and more that continue in her honor and the legacy that she shared. And so I share all of that with you because that's what brought me to Rights of Nature. It's not just about passing a law that recognizes that nature is a person. It's about recognizing that inherent sovereignty and responsibility you have and duty of care you have that may be through water walking. It may be through being an advocate and having a microphone in front of you. It may be through being an educator and teaching what we call now junior water walkers in the classroom, the lessons that Grandma Josephine taught us. And so through that work, I came to learn from the water walkers that the Great Lakes, the lakes, water, they're living. They deserve recognition, they deserve rights, they deserve protection. And so the first piece of earth law legislation, as I'd like to call it, that I was introduced to was a parliamentary bill put forward by the water walkers in 2017 to the Canadian Parliament for the recognition of the inherent legal rights of the Great Lakes. That bill, it lives in limbo somewhere in Parliament. It didn't move very far. but it became a part of a galvanizing force that I wanted to continue to champion. And so that's what I've done since 2017, and largely through advocating for folks who are already doing the work on the ground, folks like those that Britt and Pioneers work with, that the work of Grandmother Casey and movement rights, where we have Indigenous nations all around the world recognizing the inherent rights of rivers, the inherent rights of the ocean, the inherent rights of trees and plants and different relatives that make our existence on this planet possible. So with that, I will stop my very long storytelling and pass it over.
I was just getting into it. I'm sorry to stop. Good stuff here. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
No, I really mean it. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Right. It is a good morning. I want to recognize that we're guests here on this portion of Mother Earth and say thank you to the caretakers of this territory right now, the Lakota people. And to say, I'm looking at all your beautiful faces. Many of us have interacted in these last days, last years, and I'm especially excited because I see my youth back there, my grandson, Mato Camp, and stand up, you three. You make me so proud. I love you. So much. We had a beautiful ceremony at Wind Cave yesterday. Yeah. Appreciate you. And you have something that you'll be offering in the next day? Yeah. So I was asking, Dante and I were on the bus yesterday, and I asked him, what are you doing right now, son? He said, we're trying to raise money for the youth around here who went to the schools and didn't have school supplies and backpacks. And so I'm trying to raise that issue up so that when it comes time, maybe we can do something about that to help them. Foundations and other things to have such a process that it would be months before they were able to complete their mission. We need those kids to be able to go to school with a pencil and a backpack now, today. So I'm going to kind of be lifting that up occasionally. Thank you. Thank you. You just stood for water. And that's what we're here for. Niaka, the living water, contains all life, and all life is contained within water, that song says. So it comes strong in thunderstorms. It comes strong in the waves that of the Mother Ocean. She sings softly in the wombs of the mothers as they prepare to birth their children. And then she pushes with great strength. She comes gently in the fogs where the spirits walk and talk and teach and guide. She moves gently through the lights of the Father's Son and gives us rainbows. She has an intricate voice within your body that connects us with all that has ever been. All that has ever been. She has a memory. She has a message. And she's the reason that people like us think that we have her voice, because we do. She has her ability to come through us, through our blood, through our DNA, through the tissues of our body that call for her, for having life itself. It's an interesting thing, this human ego, that sometimes keeps us from being able to respond in a manner that allows us to be humble and to accept the fact that the very, very truth, as my boys, my sons, my daughters, my children, my grandchildren, all of us who were involved in places like Standing Rock as water protectors and land defenders, also realize within our very spirits that we are not here protecting nature, that we are nature protecting itself.
Mm-hmm.
We're on the very brink of extinction as a species because of our behavior. There's a natural law that lives. Some folks call it climate change. Some folks call it earthquakes, tornadoes, wildfires, volcanoes, tidal waves. But it is natural law, and it is part of the prophecy of purification that our Mother Earth has to do in order for all species on Earth to be able to thrive and to live within the natural world, to be called nature. When you go into a place that the people are disconnected from her, from Mother Earth, from Father Sky, from the very breath that we share today, that again is as ancient as there is. And you go into those places that they call themselves power, they call themselves elected officials, they call themselves the ones that this young man mentioned as treaty makers. When our true treaties are within the natural law, our true treaties are those that say, we understand that breath is sacred, that the winds that blow are sacred. We understand that those are life. And so our treaty is with that wind. Our treaty is with the breath that we share. And that when we commodify that in these things that they call carbon trading and carbon sequestration, that we're breaking the treaty of life that the Creator, that the Mother Earth asked us to be part of, to come onto this place as two-legged beings in relationship with all that is. And we're also breaking the treaty within the two legs' ability to participate here on Earth. When we have a treaty with the sacred water itself, that when we come from the womb and the first medicine is our mother's milk, that comes itself from the earth and from the oceans, then that treaty is something that we hold sacred. We of the Red Nations here on this portion of Turtle Island, we Sundance. We come to a place of our own spirituality where we do without water, we do without food, and we dance in the sun with our feet on the earth in order to keep those sacred items known in our own spirits as sacred, and to be able to make it where the generations to come still have those same items, breath and water. And we go without food so that the rooted nation, those with their roots in the ground, the corn, the wheat, all of those things, understand that we appreciate them. We don't take them for granted. These cells that are built from the very first one, that's the mother and the father coming together to make life and begins to divide. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because we have a relationship with those with their roots in the ground that feed the mother. And the cells begin to divide with the forelegs when the meat comes into our mouth, with the wings as they come into us. Those relationships are always there within the natural law. So those treaties that you all talk about, those are reflections of that, and they're valid. Because we've come to a time in history that is a surprise to this great-grandma. I had never had a thought that those things that were taught to us would someday be part of the prophecy that we had to fulfill. As AIM activists, I was against sharing any of our traditional law knowledge. I felt that it was something that we had paid with our blood, with our generations, with the lives of my people being removed from the very land that the Creator placed us on. And that our love for our ways was so deep that it only belonged to us. But there came a time in prophecy when we were told as AIM warriors, me as AIM mama, I had the honor of being the one to stay home and take care of all the children and change the diapers and cook the food and feed the people. While my brothers, my husband, my daddy, so many of them went to the front lines and put their lives down so that our people might live. But prophecy was told to us again and again and again and again. There will come a day in the purification of Mother Earth that we will have to rise and to teach. That's what it said. And so in this day and in this time, we come to the forefront of what's called the environmental movement, which in reality is us realigning human law with natural law. And we come to share those things that are the ways that have always been for your people, for my people, for all humankind, that once understood that within the natural law we have a beautiful place to be, but it is within the respect of all living things, and all things are living. So how do we do that? How do we take the cosmology of the Indigenous peoples that still remember? And it's with a piece of paper often. It is with something that travels through the forces of humanity's making these roadblocks to life itself. It is taking the cosmology that the Creator gave to us, that we have clung to in song, in spirit, and thought, and putting it into a place of understanding where, using the very sovereignty that the Creator gave us, we create a boundary of their behavior within the territories that we presently live in. And for me, that came over a series of years, thousands of prayers, and inner direction, because I listened to the earth and the waters and the airs. I listen to the voices of my ancestors that still live within me. And I listen to the great-great-great-grandchildren of my great-grandchildren and what is necessary for them. We've come to a turning point, and we're making that turn. You and I, we're the warriors. We're the warriors of peace. We're the warriors of goodness. We're the warriors of rebalance. And as we do these things, perhaps one necessary step for me is to put on a piece of paper and pass it through the bureaucracy, something that says the immutable Ponca rights of nature. And to take all of the feelings and understandings that have been brought into my being, put it on a piece of paper, pass it through the Department of Interior, and into the voice of Congress. As a sovereign people, not only to protect the generations to come, but to protect my neighbors, the farmers, the ranchers, those that still live in the innocence of believing that their patriotism has to be paid for through poisoning the earth and the waters and the airs. But we're in this together, and the time for action is imminent. You know, I would be much more comfortable with my youth out there on the streets, because voices have to be lifted. Headlines have to be made. Humanity has to turn itself from its ego to its spirituality. And that's what we're here to share with you today. WILD12.
Thank you both. I guess in order to do my due diligence as a presenter, I should try to encapsulate the purpose and intentions and history of this rights of nature movement. A very simple story comes to mind. I worked at a preschool, and next to the preschool they were developing a small neighborhood, and our preschool had this love and fascination for this beautiful bird's nest that existed in a pine tree right adjacent to our property. And during their construction, one of the construction workers was going to bulldoze this tree. It had to come down. The principal of our school runs out screaming and crying and yelling, almost getting arrested for the way that she was behaving towards this contractor, saying, "Please stop, stop." And unfortunately, she was able to do nothing legally. In that moment, that tree existed on that person's property, and under the United States legal system, property rights are paramount. And when you own property, you have the right to do with it what you desire within the confines of the law. And often our environmental scheme is one of a permit process, not a protecting process. It's about how much you can get away with, not necessarily with how much you can conserve. And so over time, while we say the rights of nature movement has probably developed in our Western legal system in the 70s, this idea that we have to be in a stewardship and in a relationship of reciprocity with our ecosystem, but with our ecosystems and not with our ego systems. That was the perfect Freudian slip. Yes, that nailed it. Y'all can all go home. You got it. And so this idea is far more ancient than our current Constitution. And when we say pioneers that we're attempting to indigenize the law, what we're saying is that we are bringing back this ancient law and this natural law of necessary reciprocity and of equal footing, you know, not the equal footing doctrine, and there are lawyers in here that you learned about in school that, you know, ruins the rights of rivers, but equal footing between human beings and their ecosystems. And so when we say rights, like, what does that mean? Like, I have a right to not get punched in the face, but like, what do I do if someone's arm is swinging? You know, well, in our court system, I would file an injunction and tell them, no, sir, you may not swing your arm towards my face. You know, and that on the micro goes to the macro, you know, and so what happens when they do hit my face? Well, then I would go to court and tell them, Your Honor, I've just been punched in the face, and it hurts this much, and the Honor is like, well, it's about $20,000. That's how much her face hurts. And so currently in our legal system, these rules of rights as they apply to ecosystems, if I wanted to go into a court and carry an ecosystem with me, I would have to prove as a human being that I have been hurt, either economically or that my health is at risk. I have to center myself as a human. We have to do what they say in law school, quote, finding the perfect plaintiff, finding that one who has been injured or who is about to be injured. And I will just say right now that the rights of nature movement is not a panacea, and it is not an immediate fix. It is simply an articulation of a value system that our legal system needs to walk boldly towards, so that not only do nature's rights to exist and exist codified, as Grandma Casey said, in paper, but human beings and their right to raise their voice and say stop on behalf of an ecosystem is protected. And oftentimes in these environmental worlds we can get into debates and into conversations in terms of which strategy is the best, and I will just humbly say that we should try all strategies, because the dominant legal system does not want people to be able to go to court on behalf of an ecosystem. And if I was to simplify the spirit of the movement, it is carrying nature's damages and carrying nature's burdens into the court system. And will that work? Well, I don't know. In the United States, Trump has appointed more judges than any other sitting president. So do we expect the current judges sitting to recognize these laws? I don't know, but we should try, because, the word is powerful. The spoken word, the oral history of these indigenous nations that have stewarded and protected this land created a traditional legal framework that continued culture for millennia. And in 300 years of colonial written law, we've seen an absolute ecocide and desecration. So obviously the written word and spoken word is powerful. And so with that said, I would like to pose the question of, we've seen a lot of counties and cities and municipalities, in the Western legal framework in the US bring forward rights of nature laws, and the backlash to these movements has been fierce. However, because of tribes' sovereign immunity, and because of their sovereignty, and because of their unique political status, there's a power beyond what a county or beyond what a township might have in passing one of these laws. So how do you feel that tribal governments in the United States are positioned to be able to carry these laws and effectuate them more than the current non-tribal government legal ecosystems, if you will?
I was going to have Grandma Casey go first, because she's really on the front lines of this. Let's see. I pause and I think, because rights of nature, and particularly right now, it's a very harsh legal environment to exist within, particularly in the United States. Maybe we might say there's more forward thinkers or thinkers leaning towards that path of writing our value system in other legal jurisdictions around the world. But I don't know, these things, they wax and wane, and policy pendulum swinging from one way to the other. So you may say one jurisdiction's friendly in 2024, and then in the snap of a finger it's not in 6 months to a year to 5 years. So ultimately, I think it does come down to communities, to families, to collectives of individuals coming together and having courageous conversations about how they want to be part of nature, how they want to live up to those responsibilities that we all are gifted when we're born onto this planet. So I lead with that because, you know, you have states like Utah that passed a complete ban on any rights of nature legislation in the state of Utah by municipality, a township, etc. That doesn't mean that everyday people in townships and things can't still do it. You just may wind up in court, but so do you wind up in court when you do it on the other side. So I don't think that that necessarily should be the reasoning as to why someone doesn't pursue rights of nature. That you may have an unfriendly political or legal system that you're operating within. We saw a backlash as well in Florida with similar bans. I don't know if it went, someone else in the audience may be able to correct me if it went to the state legislature of Florida. I think it was more county level bans of rights of nature type legislation. That all being said, as Britt pointed out, as tribal nations, we operate within our own legal systems, our own legal jurisdiction. We have the sovereignty to make our own laws. And so where we are seeing a evolution and blossoming of rights of nature legislation in the United States, it's often being led by tribal nations and indigenous peoples. So people will often ask, oh, like, why aren't we seeing rights of nature legislation in the United States? And I say, well, one, bans, and two, we actually are seeing it, and it's being led by indigenous people. So if we want to learn and be able to continue to see that movement thrive, we should be investing in indigenous governments and indigenous legal systems and in those activating forces that are already giving us good models and examples of how to do this work. So that's a little bit of what I'll say to that question. But the only other thing I'll say is from the Canadian context, and I think is a really good example, is we had the first river within Canada recognized as a legal person in 2021. And that was done through individual resolutions, but a joint process by the Innu First Nation and a regional Quebecois sort of organization. So it was, the way it is, it's kind of, you've got your local municipalities and then they have a regional governance body of those municipalities, and they also pass their own resolutions. So we had 2 joint resolutions recognizing this river. They had worked collaboratively over years, but through the leadership of largely women and youth Innu, to see that recognition put forward. And to me, at least within the context of Turtle Island in North America, that is the preeminent example. Personal opinion here, but that's the preeminent example because to date, this may change, don't take my words and then go file an action against them, but they haven't had the backlash. They haven't had the legal action waged against them. And I think in large part it's because they brought all different actors together, everyone that has an interest in that river together, to co-design what the law should look like and then implement it simultaneously. You and your canoe in your river and you and your ship in the river, we don't have to cross our legal systems. They can exist inherently, sovereignly, but parallel. And that, I think, is a really good global model for how do we allow for the persistence and continuity of Indigenous law alongside Western legal systems where the two can be symbiotic.
I like that. Thank you. That's a great example. I think my mind just goes all over the place with this whole concept because what is law? So the colonizers came here under the doctrine of discovery, right? I have a right to your land, I can kill you, I can take every, what is called resources, although I'd like to always remind people, take the RE off of that because everything is a source of life. Remember that every time you hear the word. That they came with a piece of paper. They wrote it. I write mine. That's where I come from. I believe that just assuming the power of what we have to do has to be done right now. We do not have the time to equivocate about whether we have the right to do something or whether we should do something or how we should do something. That was a perfect example of people taking within their own context of their own space of how they should act. And they did it, and it's standing. So within the territory of the Ponca Nation, that's what we chose to do, is to write a statute that will take someone into the Ponca court. This is all theoretical right now too, because we're being preemptive. We are putting something into place for when we are capable of really prosecuting. Right now, within the court systems that the United States put in place to keep us under their thumb, we can't prosecute white folks in the Ponca court. That's the way we put it. However, we did not want to go into federal court because that's their court. We didn't want to go into federal court because of Trump appointees. You know, the times that the American Indian movement challenged the right for children to wear long hair into schools, we ultimately lost in the Supreme Court. How it changed everything was that we raised the issue, and so people quit making our young men cut their hair in school. And that's what we're doing with rights of nature as well. Number one, we're putting something on a piece of paper because we have the right to do it the same as they did. And we should, because we know better than they do how to behave on earth. So we have written that, we have it in place in our statutes. We also have the rights of rivers. We also put a moratorium on fracking and injection wells in our territory. That's holding. That went through the Department of Interior. That means the federal government has approved it on our behalf, because they're such good guardians. That's just such a silly joke, isn't it? But you can do things and then say, challenge me, challenge me. I'm telling you, this is how we believe, this is what our law is. Challenge me. I challenge you to do the same.
I wanted to open it up for questions. Is there anyone in the audience that has a question? Yes, sir, please.
Ulrich Stöcker from Rewilding Oder Delta in Germany. In the last years I've worked for another organization which is called Environmental Action Germany, and one of the issues we are dealing with is the question of the rights of nature. So last year we made publications. We founded an association in Germany, and I have a question and a remark. The question is, during the research there was always the GARN, so the Global Alliance of Rights of Nature. What does this gremium, what role can it play in your perspective? And the second point is, I'm still inspired from the part before regarding the southern oceans and so on. One of the people I cooperated the most is a lawyer from a law firm in Germany and Indonesia. It's Anna von Rebai, and she is working with the High Seas Treaty, so on. So we have resolution drafts, number 5, number 6, and so on. And I think it would be of enormous importance to speak also about the rights of the seas and the rights of the sea at all. Many of the drivers, in my feeling, worldwide are people from island states, as you are. And that is a very strong movement. And I think we still can try to better connect these resolutions that we draft now during this week with this perspective. But for all these island people, for all the Indo-Pacific actors in that battle, I would say it's very important. If you are interested, I can give you the contact of this law firm that's exclusively working on the rights of the sea. That could be perhaps helping you in such issues. But my question is about the Garn. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for asking and thank you for what you're doing. I work with GARN, Global Alliance on the Rights of Nature. Specifically at this time, we are forming, by we I mean your Aunt Julie is the Plains coordinator for the Indigenous Council and for Movement Rights, my oldest daughter. And what we are forming with GARN, we work very closely with GARN. Shannon Biggs, who's one of the co-founders of Movement Rights, Osprey Oriole Lake is also there, that we work with in women's issues on the international level and in the UN, is very active in sharing these messages. I would encourage all of you to get in touch with GARN, Global Alliance on the Rights of Nature, and specifically the Indigenous people, because they have many hubs there, including youth hubs, and European hubs, etc. We are forming an Indigenous Council, and we are asking those hubs, we are offering to the hubs the Indigenous perspective on any of the issues that they're bringing to the Global Alliance of Rights of Nature, because the Indigenous Council will be the ones to be able to say, is that spiritually aligned with the Indigenous perspectives and cosmologies? And we're inviting people from around Mother Earth, from every continent and every ocean, space, to be on this council. And it will be bringing the spirituality as well as the cosmology of the territory, because each of us is governed by what the land, what the earth tells us, what the water tells us, what the wind tells us, what the fire tells us. And we want the European perspective, the African perspective, the polar perspectives. Yeah, that's, by the way, why I like to play Gran-Gran. You know, Gran-Gran gets to be the boss of the South Pole, right? Yes. And she's a waterbender. I like all of those things. But she also has a voice for what's going on at the poles, because that is of vital importance. And it has to do with all of the things that we're talking about. We're also dealing with whales being called carbon sinks. Yeah, and their lives being commodified. There are 1,000 issues that each one of us has to deal with, and we have to do it now. Nobody has time to step back and think about it. We can make the laws, we can make the resolutions, we can take to the streets, we can get on social media, but whatever we have to do, it has to start now. You can be doing it right now. And then you're doing it when you walk out of here, and you're doing it when you get home, and you're moving into the next thing. We don't even have time to get tired. We are doing this, and it will energize you.
Thank you. This is a great message to all of us to take home after being here at the WILD12. Thank you to the host, and thank you to all these ideas, to this sharing moment where we can get all these ideas and take it home and give hope to our communities, and give also a pathway to where we should work and how we can stand all for to fix those issues. And this is on the name of our children and next generation to come.
Yes, thank you.
Seconding, echoing everything there. I couldn't say it better, but for just a few resources, so GARN, Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, they're a wonderful organization. There are many hubs, as were mentioned, where folks can volunteer and get involved, and also access resources, especially if you're building your knowledge around the rights of nature, Earth Law movement. They are just a great support system for that. So I'm a part of both the academic hub and the North American hub, and one of the really great initiatives that came out of the academic hub, Linda just stepped out of the room as another collaborator in that space, was what we call the Eco-Jurisprudence Monitor. So you can go to ecojurisprudencemonitor.org. It is a global data tracking system of all of the different types of rights of nature initiatives, eco-jurisprudence initiatives, from case law to resolutions to constitutional amendments that have occurred all around the world. And I'm really proud of that particular initiative because we allow for you to search by political jurisdiction, which is countries, but also by ecosystem. So you can say, what are all the mountains in the world that have received legal recognition, ocean, etc. And you also can search by Indigenous-led initiatives, which doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So it's kind of cool and definitely something to take advantage of and be thankful for. At Earth Law Center, we also created kind of what we like to call legal Zoom for the planet. It's called earthlawportal.org. It's largely concentrated on U.S. templates and letter campaigns right now, but if you're from a U.S. jurisdiction, it provides you with different templates for how to write a resolution, for how to draft a letter to your congressperson, etc., to advocate for whatever ecosystem or entity or relative you choose. And then lastly, to your question, circling back around, we've been a strong advocate for what another colleague really was their brainchild and has spearheaded, but through lots of collaborations with Indigenous peoples, etc., Michelle Bender, and now at the Earth Law Center, the Universal Declaration on the Rights of the Ocean, which I think is what you were referencing, UDOR. And that is really trying to be pushed through the UN system and to be adopted by the General Assembly as a declaration that recognizes the inherent rights of the ocean. You can look up my name or Michelle Bender's name, and we've got some writings on this online. And I love all of your work, but I think as a fellow ocean person, and I think to our Maori relative as well, I'd be remiss in not saying that we need to have an end to deep sea mining. Even the potential of that is catastrophic, no matter what part of the planet it is put forward in. And if it doesn't happen in your waters, I'm sure they'd recommend it in my waters at some point because that's what they like to do. That said, I think tying our extinction to the High Seas Treaty is a way that they are also weaponizing that treaty against us. So what do I mean by that? The only way to stop deep sea mining is by having that treaty signed, I think, is boxing us into a corner. The reason I say that is I would be an advocate for the High Seas Treaty if it allowed for Indigenous nations and peoples to be signatories of that treaty. It does not. The UN system does not recognize us as inherent sovereign governments.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I want a High Seas Treaty, but I want you to recognize my sovereignty as an Indigenous person and an Indigenous national, not have me have to be subsumed by the United States. So that's my only caveat there,
Yeah,
and I hope it's okay.
It's so, yeah, that's so important. And you also referenced the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. You know, of course, that should be included within that treaty. And you also mentioned the fact that there was no consultation. And that's a very, very horrible word because the word should be consent.
Yes.
So within the UNDRIP, or the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, is FPIC, which is the right to free. Think of each one of these words as I say them. Free, prior, informed consent. And everybody everywhere should have that right. Before anything comes into the territory of the Indigenous people or anyone else, there should be that free, prior, and informed consent. And I say that clearly because when Keystone and Keystone XL were trying to come through our territory, which I want to tell you all was stopped by corn and people. Sacred corn was planted in the path, and there's a big long story, but your Uncle Mikasi did that one with a prayer and a dream that came to him in a song. We'll talk about that another time. But the and white farmers in Nebraska or Nebraska. I can see their faces. Art and Helen Tanderup were part of that as well. But the Keystone, when it came through, didn't even go for consultation with the tribe, which would have been the bare minimum. But they went to two individual Ponca men who I try not to shame by saying their names, because they agreed to allow Keystone XL to come through, buy money under the table, and used playground equipment. And that was the consultation that the federal government accepted to allow it to come through our territory. So it's important that we keep those words in our minds, free, prior, and informed consent, and that as the Indigenous Council is trying to be involved with all the different hubs, because we do have a spiritual mandate to do so, so should the Indigenous peoples be involved in every treaty that has to do with the homelands of our relatives. Thank you.
I think we have time for another question. Yes?
Aloha.
Aloha.
I come from the island of Kauai, and I am so grateful and honored to be here in celebration of our beautiful oceans that are the source of all of life. I've had the honor to swim with humpbacks in Mo'orea, and I'd like to share a quick aloha chant to bring the energies of our cetacean kin that are the guardians of the song lines of the waters. Aloha, aloha nui, aloha, aloha nui loa. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I want to honor the deep legacy of the trust of the queens of Hawaii, that they understand that it's the intention of trust that builds the coalitions that allow the legacies to endure. And so I love this conversation because I'm seeing the threads of all the ancestors that are giving us the seeds of knowledge to stand together with the seeds that have been entrusted to us to build these coalitions wherever we are, because we can't chase the treaty language people. They are a culture of rape. They are a culture of parasitic extraction. So how can we at this meeting come together and build these coalitions of shared intentions? And so this is so exciting to me, because in the islands, kuleana, responsibility is what we're being taught, and that the children are learning. And we're all children of this earth, and we all have gifts to bring what has been entrusted in our own hearts as individuals. And that is the power as individuals that I just celebrate seeing today, being here together. And I really sing this song of aloha because we are all one family. And I really feel the power of trust as a legal term as well, that we build trusts that are built as an intentional foundation of these intentions, and we invite nature as the main trustee of these trusts, as a possible legal vehicle that we're working on Kauai, so that we bypass treaties and any legal pre-existing capacities to actually encode these trusts of what has been entrusted to us, and to give language from all angles. So like that other example you gave of the river in Canada, these voices can come together, and like you said, grandmother, we are here, we are embodying what has been entrusted to us, and we are rebuilding the bridges of where each of us have broken our trust with Creator and our ancestors and all of creation, and may we all step into that responsibility and celebrate that we're coming home together, and really bring that celebration, because it's the spirit of the heart and the spirit of the waters dancing and bubbling together that will bring us together as a human family. So thank you for this time to speak, and I honor all of our relations that have brought us here today, and I celebrate what's to come. Mahalo ke akua. Thank you.
No, I'm good. Whatever you want to do.
I just want to give all thanks to everyone in this room, our speakers, you as well. We all live in a natural ecosystem, and unfortunately we also all live in a legal ecosystem. And we all know that the legal ecosystems that we live in have been colonized by a spiritual ideology that separates us. And this movement is one step, just one step, to articulate a value system and a spiritual system that we need to embody and carry forward if we are going to have any hope of restoring what has been lost or protecting what remains. If you would like to reach us, please come up after. I brought these little magazines. I like to call it positive political propaganda, but it is this. Thank you, Grandma Casey. Yes, thank you. It's a document written to inspire young people to bring this movement to your community, and it highlights a number of the tribal governments within the United States that have taken this traditional wisdom and codified it in law. And I'm so thankful for all of you for your listening, and I hope that you have a wonderful time, and I hope that all the ideas that have gone inside of your spirit in this period that we've all spent together go and blossom in your own home community. And thank you.